All right. So welcome to Building React Components. Another title might be Building React Components Outside the Context of an Application, or maybe a third title might be Storybook, which is awesome. So let's get started. All right, so the purpose of this live coding demo is to show a typical ReactJS component developer workflow, emphasis on the workflow. So we're going to go from design to publish with a few shortcuts in the middle. But so this is our design. What's that?
The designer gave it to you?
Yeah, the designer. The designer gave it to me, yes. And obviously it needs a lot of work. It's not there yet, but we'll get started anyway. It's always a good idea to get started early on this so that you can give feedback to your designer before he rolls off to the next project. And the disclaimer is, in reality, this is something I contrived, so please don't snap a picture of it on it with your phone and tweet it, because it's not going to be on any sites upcoming. All right, so the steps in a component workflow. In the past, coding was very page-centric or screen-centric, and we want to get away from that. As we componentize things, we'll break away from that page-centric mentality, and we'll end up with more reusable code. And then we'll code that component in isolation, if that's appropriate. Outside of the consuming project, that is, if it has some potential for reuse. And then we'll publish it probably to NPM, and then we'll consume it, and then we'll hopefully reuse it if we did a good job on it. And if we didn't, maybe we can refactor it and then reuse it. And then repeat. So we will anticipate changes through time, so you don't need to code every possible scenario up front. And since we use semantic versioning, that'll be painless, and we can do it with confidence. So the first step was to break down the design, and we've already done that. We've analyzed the pieces that we can break up into components, and one of them is a tile. It repeats on this page, so we'll get immediate reuse, but you don't actually have to have any reuse to make a component out of something. And then it's simple enough, just a title, a subtitle, and an image, so maybe we'll get other reuse out of it too. So let's visually isolate that. That's what we're going to build right there. So let's talk a little bit about isolations, or a little bit more about isolation. When we work on a component in isolation, it allows us to think about the component in its purity and ignore some of the nuances of our project. And then later we can build in some hooks into the API to accommodate those nuances. And so hopefully what we end up with is better reusability. So Storybook is a pretty awesome UI development tool. It's built into our React Starter and our Component Starter. It's especially good at helping us visualize UI components in their different states and work on those components in isolation. So let's take a look. Here's the Airbnb date picker. So this is running. So if you look at this box right here with the start date and end date, that's the component right there. Just that little piece is their component, their date picker component. And then the rest of it is Storybook Chrome, shall I say, with their component and its stories listed down here on the left. And notice that they have a lot of stories to show you different UI states, possibilities for this component. So under the default scenario, you choose a start date, and then you choose an end date, and then under a different story, you can do a single month view. So notice now just 1 month shows up, or they have a vertical layout available. So this allows them to visually see the different ways that they can configure and consume this component. So it's pretty sweet, I think. Any questions on Storybook? We'll use it some more, but that's it for the demo unless you have questions. Okay. All right, Webpack is a bundler that can pipe as it bundles. Basically, you give it the starting point into your code, and it navigates all the imports. and it calls loaders based on what the file type is that it's loading. So for example, we use the Babel loader to process our JS files, and it also allows us to put ES6 syntax in there, and it knows how to deal with that and spit out ES5 code in the end. And then there's lots of loaders, so we also use a loader for CSS and for images, etc. Okay, so a couple housekeeping items before we continue. The rest of the time is going to be live coding. So I beg or respectfully request for your assistance watching for typos and bugs. Maybe that'll help you stay awake too. And so thank you in advance for that. Second, the main point is to demonstrate a ReactJS component workflow. But we'll see a lot of new stuff. Well, at least to some of you, it'll be new. For example, Webpack, ES6, React, Storybook, the stack generator, the component project structure, and more. So feel free to interrupt me and ask questions, because if I just blow through this and you get nothing out of it, then it was worthless. But if you ask questions, then it'll be more valuable. To everybody, my theory is that if you have the question, probably at least a few other people do too. All right, so here's where we are in that workflow. We've finished the design step, and now we're going to code the component in isolation. So when we come across a slide that has code in it, you don't have to focus too much on the code part, because we're going to, for the most part, we're going to code that stuff. And I'll spend more time on the slides where I'm not going to actually code it. So on this one, we're going to use the stack component starter, and that's this piece right here. Can't see that? Oh, let's try it over here. How about that? That's the main part right there, is to use our tool. Our generator tool is called LDS.js. So let's do it. I'm already CD'd into the right directory, and the next step was to install that tool, LDS.js, that line right there. I've already done that, so we're going to skip it, but it's there for reference. Then we're going to generate the project. So you give it the project type that you want, and then you give it a name. So we're going to just build a simple tile. Maybe I should have called it simple tile, but we'll just go with that. So now I'm just doing basic steps that you would do when you fired up a new project. And then I need, let's see, where did I get to? Oops. Okay. Now we're going to get all of our dependencies. And I'm going to add this cache min thing on the end, because I know there's still a few of you downloading Sierra right now. So speed it up with this little thing here. We'll just use my local cache instead of actually going out to the repo. And since I've done this a few times, I know they're all cached. And the other thing, I know we're going to need a couple more dependencies, so for the sake of not flipping around so much between different screens, I'm just going to install those now. I know it's not done, but it'll still let me do it. I think that one was a dash D.
No, S.
Really? S for that one? Okay, I need to fix my slide too. And then same with that one?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
What does that mean? So,
Yeah, go ahead.
you're saving them. One says a dev dependency, the other one's a top dependency. So that's a shorthand of dash D within dev only. But since this will be running that when people are in production will use these utilities, the dash S is this production dependency.
Okay, and then notice early on I fired up Atom and it's ready. So let's make that bigger. When you get a new project, the first thing you want to do is take a look at the package JSON. And the first place I go to is the scripts block. So it tells you what you can do. So npm run components, let you fire up Storybook, and then you can also do, you can write tests and linting. Then the next thing I like to look at is main. So this is your entry point into the project. So source component.js. And also, just as a note, everything source code in this project structure is in the source. And then we're going to publish it, so we're going to put a scope on it. And in the future, right now it'll let you do whatever you want. In the future, our internal NPM repository is going to force that scope. It just allows you to, it's just a future forward-looking thing where having a scope on there will let you keep simple names without name conflicts. So you don't have to do like LDS dash simple dash tile 2, whatever, to avoid conflicts. All right, let's see where we got to. All right, so let's clean out all the code that was laid down by the starter, because we don't want any of it, or most of it. So we don't need Homer. Let's get rid of him. Sorry about that. And then start with a component. Let's leave the import of the CSS file, but we don't need anything else, so we'll get that. The component spec, so there's our test. We don't really need to gut this either, because all it's doing is testing to make sure that the class got imported or got put into the component, into the element. So we can just leave that alone. And then the component story. So this is the storybook story. Now let's clean this up a little bit. We're not going to use the action. Just going to keep it simple today. Notice that we have some destructuring. Is that the right word? Destructuring? Named imports going on here, so that we can reference stories of directly instead of storybook.stories of. And then this is generic, so let's make it specific and leave it there for now, and then we can just get rid of everything else. And if I remember right, I think that's everything. Okay. So hello world is obligatory, so let's do that. But besides it being obligatory, it's how I code anyway. I always like to have a simple thing working and then I build on it. So let's do the simple thing and build on it. All right, so as of React 14, you can do React components with just pure functions. So we're going to do that. Put our hello world in a section and we'll use that section later. Oh, look at that. It's code completing. It wasn't helping me out yesterday. Yay. So that's it, I think. Did I miss anything besides the semicolon? How many people just about had a heart attack because I forgot the semicolon? Okay. All right. It's barking about my, as you can see here, it's barking about styles is never used. So let's go ahead and use it. Usually we put in a styling hook, so and we're going to style it anyway. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to cover the syntax more in a second, so if you're choking on the syntax, hold tight for just a second. All right, now it's happy. So that actually is a wrong slide. Let's update the slides. Okay, so raise of hand. How many feel like this HTML in the JavaScript file is gross? Good, okay, a lot of you. And that's the natural response, and a lot, if not most people, have that response. So because all you're going to hear out of my mouth is blah, blah, blah until we address that, let's address that. So JSX, first it's not HTML, it's JSX, and it's a syntax extension, so we're still in JavaScript here. It gives us the ability to produce React elements, which define the DOM that gets rendered. But you don't have to use JSX. You can use React.createElement instead. That same JSX looks just like that. That's equivalent. So that's available to you. And in my opinion, if you muscle your way past the gag reflex, all kinds of food possibilities open up. So I think, yeah, ratatouille. Matthew.
One thing that I've noticed about people's reaction to this JSX is a lot of people have that reaction. It's really gross. It doesn't seem right. But I have yet to find someone that once they've used it and they've done it and seen the reasons why React does it that way, I have yet to see someone that still doesn't like it.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I've seen the same. So I think it's one of the biggest complaints against JSX and React. Well, against React is the whole JSX, and they're saying the argument is that it violates the principle of separation, right, between your view and your logic. And however, I think that JavaScript and HTML is tightly coupled anyway, and there's not really a great way to separate them. So take it for what it's worth. Yeah.
You say it like it's separation of concerns. Like when you were learning things at a page level and made the concerns at that point where here's your HTML, here's your whatever, but this is kind of restructured what the concern is to being a component. And a component itself, the concern is the component, and it encapsulates the technology required to make it. But it just so happens that currently there are 3 technologies required to create a component. But those are technologies, not concerns. So
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I think too that separation of concern doesn't have to be a separation of file. Like when you created a handlebars component or something, you created a helper, that was just an easy way to start to smell that this thing was doing too much. And you can still have that, it's just in the same file. And there's still those same smells, and there's still that separation of concern. There's still those things that you need to do, and you can write JSX really quickly and just pull it together. Just in the same way you can write any other really important.
True. Thank you. All right. So can't hear it. Okay, I remember that commercial. Just dated myself there. And so the point there is to try it. If you try it and you still hate it, then maybe try it some more. No, just kidding. I tell my son, who really hates new foods, that he's got to try it 10 times before he can tell me he doesn't like it. So give it a try is the point anyway. So let's talk about the syntax a little bit. So notice there's an arrow function going on right here. So that's ES6 and not React. One of the nice things about React is that we are in JavaScript. And then you'll notice this class name. If this was HTML, we would have said class. But since we're in JavaScript and class and for are reserved words, we shouldn't use them. So we use class name and HTML4 instead. There aren't a lot of grossnesses to React, but that's one of them. So
like less than 5 DSL things, like you'd have to remember yourself.
yeah. So Jared said there's less than 5 of those DSL-like things that you'd have to remember in case you can't hear from the back. Okay. Let's see what else. I think that's it. So now we need a storybook story for our component. So let's go build that. So that's right here. And what we need there is we need stories of, and we're going to pass it usually the name of your component, and then a module. And that, I don't know exactly what module does, but it has something to do with the story registration. So what's that?
You want a comma between those two?
Oh, thanks. And then we're going to chain. I don't know why that didn't indent for me. And we're going to call.
Where'd you get the module from?
It's
From
part of
stores of?
no, it's part of Node. It's just when you register a story, it's just telling
Like the module.export.
exactly. It's like passing around that Node global to let it know where it's coming from.
Okay, now we can have multiple stories under the tile component, so we're going to name them. First one we'll call default, and we get a second argument is a function that returns a React element. So we're going to use JSX, and we're going to need to tell a compiler that this is an expression, so we need an extra set of parentheses there. And then we'll just consume our tile. Hello world. With any luck. Oh, let's run it. Thank you. Ta-da. Okay. That's it. Have a good day. Okay, not really. Let's see what we got left here. Oops. So we need, let's get out of the hello world scenario here, and we're going to need some props. We need to pass some data into our component. So let's get ready for that. So back to our component, props coming right here. I'm going to, for those of you who know that I'm going to make a syntax error here, just hold off for a second. I'm going to do it on purpose. We're going to need, oh, let's look at the design. Hang on. Okay, so we're going to need a tile, a title, a subtitle. We're going to need the image about the information about the image, and then we typically put in at least one styling hook. So let's put that in there, and then let's consume those maybe in reverse. So we're going to use let the class name come in right here, and just in case that comes in like undefined or something, let's use one of those tools that we imported at the beginning, or that we installed at the beginning, which was, yeah, classes, join classes. It's just going to get rid of all the extra white space and nulls and undefined and stuff like that, so we'll route. That. Now we need to consume our image, so let's do it like this. Oops. Nope, that was wrong. There we go. So we're going to use object spread notation, some ES6 syntax to just spread out our image. So we're going to expect that to come in as an object and have all the properties that an image would need. And close my image tag. Then we're going to need our title and subtitle, so let's just wrap those in a div so that they stay together, stacked right. Let's do an H2 on the title. There, and H3 on the subtitle. Like that.
Why was variables wrapped in curly braces?
Good question, Matthew. Thank you for asking. So since we're in JSX, we need to step out of the JSX syntax, and we need to step into the JavaScript world to reference our JavaScript variables. So curly braces. I think. All right. Did I miss anything? Okay. I want to show that error. So any other things? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What was the export default do? Is that just default router values?
Do you want to explain that one, Jared?
So in ES6 modules, you can export different, you can have named exports where you import it, you have to kind of have those curlies to do that. But each file can also have a default export where if you just want that one thing, like if there's a main exportable thing, that would be the syntax there. And that way when you import it somewhere else, you don't need the curlies. get it. So if you're familiar with Node, Node doesn't really have a concept of like it would be your main export node. So if you do a modules.export, that would be your default. Right?
Okay.
But this allows multiple exports per file.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So now we need to send those props from our story. So let's do that. We need the title. Actually, let me cheat here for the sake of time. Let me see if I have this in my history. There we go. Yay. Okay, title and subtitle. Oops. So we're going to have the Aba Nigeria temple. Don't know if I pronounced that right, but there it is. And then we needed some image information, right? And so now we need to step out of JSX, right? And we also want to pass an object literal. So we're going to do another set of curly braces. And then so we need a source to make that thing work. And we're going to send it the image. We're going to let what image? It's just magic. Let's set an alt so that I don't feel dumb about making it an object. Okay, you're right, we need to find the image. So we're going to import it, and we're going to let Webpack wire this all together. Isn't Webpack cool? Say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. From the current directory. Oh, it's not there yet. Let's go get it. So I had those ready. Let's put them in. Source. Okay, now the image is there. Can't get it autocomplete for me. Oops. Okay, what did I miss? Anything? Okay, I think we're good. And I think it's time to fire up. Oops, it's right here. Okay, cannot resolve module join classes. Well, that's not the error I expected, but let's fix that one. You're right, it's wrong. The module name is right. It was wrong, thank you. Here. Oh, no, that is.
Go to your package.json.
Didn't get installed or saved, so let's go fix that.
Scroll down.
You want me to scroll down?
To your regular places.
Yeah, it didn't save, didn't install and save, did it? Okay, so that was npm. That's the name of it, right?
I thought it was classes.
Join class names.
Let's cheat. That's probably correct. That's different. Okay, that looks more successful. And now the next error, join classes. Wait.
Fix on your import statement.
Thank you. Okay, now, next one. Objects are not valid as a React child. It found an object with keys. So what that's talking about, that one was actually planned, the only one that was planned, is that the React is going to pass one property to our function, one object, and it's called props, and we're going to destructure it like that. Save that, and go. You got a question?
Yeah. So what was the previous error? Why did you have the curly braces around the default?
good question. Let's look at the code. So when all we're coding here is a basic function. This is just a function. There is some JSX in here, but otherwise this is just a function. And when React called this function, it called it with only one parameter, and we were expecting 4.
Okay.
So we wrapped it in these curly braces to destructure it. We could have instead said, ignore the lines below there. We could have said props and then referenced them like this, props dot title, and that would have worked too.
So what's the benefit of doing it that way rather than just doing it props?
Less typing.
Let's take.
That's.
That,
It also tells your consumer of your component what you're expecting. So you're saying, hey, I need a title, I need a subtitle, I need an image, whereas props didn't really tell me anything.
Right.
They'd have had to comb through the code. So documentation too.
And sorry, last question here, but component stories. What were you doing there? What was the?
Okay, so what I was doing here, this is basically just a test, and we're using Storybook as like a test framework, a visualization tool. And so we're basically just consuming that component right here. So we're going to import it right here, and then we're going to tell Storybook, hey, here's a story, put it on the screen for us, and then we consume that tile right there.
That's it.
Yeah, it's the HTML, JSX, however you want to think about it, but yeah, it feels like HTML. Okay, any other questions before we keep going?
So the stories of your storybook stuff, is this going to be shipped with, like, be running in prod? I mean, is this like all?
No, good question. So this is dev code here, dev/test/visualization code. So it won't go out to production. In fact, I think our bundler Webpack, when we take the final project and build it, it ignores the story files.
So it points to component.js. So there.
Right.
So prod would only ever get things you import from this file.
So those two. Right. It's walking the imports and pulling everything.
Does everyone have the role, or does anybody still need this? Okay.
Okay, let's see where we are, because I'm not sure anymore. Okay, styling. Yeah, it was kind of ugly. Let's fix it. For sure, we needed, let's pull up the design again, and let's pull up this guy, and let's get him side by side. I'm going to not make these bigger, just so that we can compare them side by side a little easier, when we got the right font size and the right font weight, etc. So bear with me on that. Let's get rid of some of the Chrome. Okay, the image is already on the left. I'm not sure why, but in my run-throughs, we had to use Flex to get that to happen, just so that the rest of the demo goes well. Let's go ahead and do that anyway. So we'll pull them. Remember, we left this import in our component to go get the CSS. Oh, I didn't clean out. Didn't clean out my CSS. Missed it. Let's clean out my CSS. Okay, that's how that was supposed to go down. Let's see if that did. There we go. That's better. Okay, so Flexbox is awesome, and if you don't know it, you don't use it often, you should learn it or relearn it. Matthew did a donuts on it recently, and then CSS Tricks has an awesome write-up on it. So that should pop our image to the left, or our title and subtitle to the right. And then the next thing we should fix is our font, and also let's pull in normalize. So usually you pull in something like normalize CSS as part of a shared set of styling for your components, for your related components, or it would be in your project. And since we have neither of those, we're just going to pull it right into our component. So I think I have a cheat for that. Well, I have a cheat for the font, so let's grab that. Put that in there, and then for the normalize, I think that's just. And then, I don't know if you noticed that, but the image popped up and then into the corner instead of having that stray margin laying there. That's part of what normalize did for us, so we know that worked. And then let's consume the font. Yeah.
If you pull a normalize and other components pull on normalize, and you could have multiple copies of normalize in the project.
Now, if you have like Node npm3, you'll have a cache. The things are all like it only resolves to one thing in Node. And then for things that escape, there's also like post CSS plugins you can do to kind of optimize your CSS and have those things.
Sorry, you're saying that it would just pick one import? It would know that there's a duplicate, so it would pick one?
So if you're using npm3, as long as the Semver ranges match to a single version of normalize, you only get one.
Okay, cool.
Okay, while that was going on, I just applied our font to the container. And then let's get the color. That's obviously not black, so let's get that going. That looks like maybe, say, 53565A. What do you think?
Something like that.
Yeah, there you go. It doesn't look quite right because of the font weight, but so let's fix that. First, we need to bring in some classes onto our title and subtitle. So that's just like we did it above. And title, style, thank you. Subtitle.
So Bruce, you're referencing some classes in the style sheet in your JavaScript?
Isn't that cool?
What's going on there?
Yeah, so Webpack is going to pull all this together for us, but basically we imported our styles with an import call, and then we just referenced them in our JavaScript. And Webpack is going to do the magic there to bring it together. So right here we're referencing styles.title, so let's make a class called title. And we need first, we need some margin between the image and the title, so let's do that. Save it, make sure that did what we thought. Yay. And then we need, let's fix the font size. And 0.5. We'll just go with that for now. No, that's too small. Is that too small?
That's small. And then fix your weight.
Yeah, let's fix the weight. And what do you think? 300. And then that looks good to me. Let's move on to our subtitle. We need some margin there too. Left. Let's just put them all in there. Same as above, I think, right? Font size. Let's see how that looks. Okay. And then weight. Let's try 700. 300, that's what we did on the other one. And then we need to see how that's looking. Need some, yeah, thanks. better. And then I think that's too small. Let's go with that. And then we need to uppercase it, so let's use a text transform. Uppercase. Oops. Let's do that. Actually, I'm going to withdraw my too big on that one, and we're going to call it good, even if it's wrong. All right. So are you liking Storybook? Isn't that cool? Yeah.
It might be good to show why it's good to import your classes into the JSX, why that's needed instead of just putting the class in there.
Okay. Did you want to rep to, or?
Okay. So the reason why you do that is in the build process of what it's adding a hash so that your classes for your components are completely encapsulated to that component. There's no spilling out. But in order to get access to that hash in that class, you need to be able to get it through that import signature.
That's true. Thank you very much.
So normally having a class title would be a problem, right?
Because of the conflicts with
Because it's
anything
global.
else that had a
Yes,
class
yes,
of
yes.
dot title.
Yeah, global namespace.
Yeah, so we're not only are we working in isolation, but React is putting us in some isolation too, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, if you want to show what the class is on the result.
Sure, good idea. So let's inspect that guy, and the class is title-1 KKXX. So there's that isolation being put on there for us. Okay.
So if I import a CSS file, and then I apply, like let's say a similar class from my import CSS to share across two different components, is that going to create a unique hash for that class for both of those two different components?
Yeah.
Yeah,
With the same style?
I think it will. Okay, let's see where we are. We got positions. There we go. Okay. Let's create some more storybook stories, and we'll go a little faster now. I'll do some more copy and pasting for sake of time. But typically, like we saw with the Airbnb day picker, there were a whole bunch of stories for that component. You'll find that you'll do the same thing just so that you can represent all the visual states of your component. And yeah. So let's create a couple of stories, 3 stories where we give it long title, long subtitle, and long both of those, and then we'll create another one where we stack up several tiles so that we can get the same kind of layout that we had in the design. And you can use that as like a functional test as you make changes to your component to make sure you didn't actually break the original layout that you had going there. So let's just paste those in. Get long title stories. Oops. Let's get our left side back here. Get rid of our inspector. Let's see what happens. Let's close this off nice and tight. So there's our long title. There's our long subtitle, and here's our long both. Oh, look at that. That's not exactly what we wanted. So let's fix that. See that? I need to steady up on my Flexbox a little bit. I need to rewatch Matthew's Flexbox presentation. So let's go fix that. That is in our component, in our container. I like to put my Flex stuff together. I don't know what you do, but that's what I like. Align items, Flex start. So that's the cross-axis of Flexbox saying, go ahead and line everything up on the top instead of saying stretch everything out, which was the default. So, ta-da, okay, all fixed. Next thing is the stacked layout. So let's put that in. Oh, I think I mentioned this already. It's like a functional test. Let's go get our, that was there. Yep, thank you. So there's our stacked story right there. And it's barking. Yeah. Let's go get the images. Let's see. All right. So it's barking about adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in a closing tag. And that means that my function needs to return a single, oh, let's go find the right. Okay. My function needs to return a single element. That's always, so you'll probably run into that a lot like I do. That's all goofed up on indentation, but we'll just let it be. And so then we have our stacked story. What's that? Oh, sure, good idea. So there was our default one, our long title, our long subtitle, our long both, and then stacked. So we're missing the spacing between, well, let's take a look. We had some spaces between the components and we're missing those. But the component's actually doing the right thing here. The component is supposed to use up all the space that was given to it. And any spacing that comes around it, you should tell it, you should put there yourself. So let's go ahead and do that. Story. We're going to add some styles to our story. So let's import styles from and that file's not there, so let's create it.
So while you're doing this, is the recommended workflow to create a different storybook for each component in your app?
That's what I've been doing. Is that?
I would, if you want. Do you have any idea, like, potential reuse for it, potentially?
I mean, because I'm just asking just opinions here, because in our app, we probably currently have, I don't know, 300 or 400 components.
Yeah, like unit test plan.
For the common components I let unit test for a lot of these.
I would apply probably the same rules here then. So anything that you unit tested, like the functional test will help it iterate over time as well. So that way if you use it in multiple contexts and you make change in one, you're not breaking the other. You can kind of see what effect it's having on as you iterate on it.
Because I could see us getting up to, thousands of components, and that would seem
It'd be hard.
cumbersome. One of these files for, 1,500 or 1,800 pounds.
So if you have a set of common ones, like you said, like you know there will be reuse values, I would definitely use.
All right, so what I did while these guys were chatting, I added a tile class. I added the CSS file for our story. I added the tile class, and I gave it a margin bottom of 1 rem. I have already imported styles from componentstory.css. Look for a bug, because there's a bug in here. I don't see it yet. And then in our stacked story, oh, I need a comma. No comma. I set the class name to. So remember we put a styling hook on our component? Let's take a look at that. So in our props, we accept a class name, and then if it's there, we apply it to the outer element. So I'm just going to send that, utilize that, and send it in. All right, it's not working. Anybody see the bug? It's a real bug. I didn't plan that.
Is the bug that it's not adding the space between the pictures, or what's the
Yeah,
bug?
that's
Well, shouldn't that styling be added to the? I didn't see the.
you want to see the styling. I want me to show that flow again. So I have a style of tile class of tile. It puts a bottom margin on it. And then I import that styles, component story, success, and then I use it in my stacked, first one of my stacked story.
You might have a mate like if you inspect on your first tile, you might just have this one being more or the other one out. Did you put margin definitions on your tile? Just see if it's getting the class first. Okay. So it's only getting
Section just has container.
it's not getting this one.
But it's the first one that has the tile on it, right? Not the second one. You look at the second one.
You're right, the first one. But yeah, they both just have one class. So it's not coming in, so there's a bug and something. Let's just look here real quick and then we'll just have to abort and continue on because we're
It's probably
running out of time.
busted NPM class.
Could be, right? Could be. Okay,
Why don't you pull off styles container and let's see if it gets just the style
about the,
to see if maybe it is the classes. See if it is that. No, it's not the class.
class name, there. Oh,
Change class name on the import statement. Change it to something else.
oh. That should have worked, okay. Nope.
We didn't change the story.
Right, you have to change the story.
Right, just move on there.
Okay, so I apologize for that, but that should have worked. Maybe afterwards I'll fix it. Okay, what's going on? What's next? Space between. All right, so where are we in our workflow? Next would be to publish, and you would do that with a bunch of git commands to commit it and tag it and push it, and then npm add user to log in to our npm repository and then publish, and that's it. And then as part of the workflow, if a bug got reported, say for example, a tile without an image leaves a stray image tag in the HTML, you would go and fix that, which we did.
You start by creating a story that shows it.
Oh yeah, thanks. Start by creating a story that shows that. So here's a storybook story. We've named it no image, and when we didn't pass any image information in. And then we would be able to visualize that problem, and then we could fix it by conditionally rendering that image tag right in our JSX. So we would step into JavaScript and do some that kind of logic. And then that would actually leave, now let's just skip that. That would actually leave the margin in the wrong place, so that's what the next slide was about, is putting the margin on the image instead of on the title and subtitle. So that's what that's about. And then in a republish, the only difference between the publish was that you might run the npm version command to roll the version forward, since we're using semantic versioning, and then commit it, tag it, push it, and then publish it again. And then next up in the workflow is to consume it in our project. We've already consumed it in our story, and that's pretty much the same. Import the tile and then use it. The difference being that we have to npm install that component because we built it in isolation. Then that's it. Just reuse it and repeat. The end.
When was your son in Puerto Rico?
Right.
That one was taken on an iPhone 6. All right, so any questions before I close off the recording? Yeah.
Storybook, when you publish it to one guy, how does that storybook I'm working in the storybook to kind of design it, but then when I want to actually consume it for production.
Yeah.
Is that what publishing and
if I understand your question correctly, part of the steps of the workflow was to eventually publish, as you mentioned. And then on the project where you want to consume it, you need to do an npm install on that component name so that it's in that project. And then you would import it and use it. Does that answer your question?
Okay, but the story code stuff would not be making the product.
Yeah, that's the question. You have a lot of code that just gets through.
So when you do an npm install on that module, you'll actually, I think you get everything in that directory.
Right.
But then when Webpack builds your project, there will never be an import statement that references anything but the production code, and so you won't end up with it in your final bundle.
Well, no, it would be like with Node, you have a main import, right? And your entire project structure could have as many files as you want that would never be included unless your main import imports them. Does that make sense? So all this code in here is just development code that you could actually, when you publish, you could use files and stuff actually not have to be there. But it is there and won't ever make it to prod because nothing ever references it. Does that make sense?
Could import it if you wanted.
Yes, if you wanted to, it's there, but you would just import from that module. That module's main attribute from the text.json points to that component.js file, and so that would be included in prod, and anything that file refers to would be included in prod. If you look at the workflow, you'll notice that component.js only brought in the production thing, and then you had that story importing it, not the other way around.
Okay, other questions?
Okay.
Thanks.
Fine.